You may start now, Dubey ji.
Okay.
Dubey sir, you may start.
Good morning, friends. It's a pleasure to be back again. I want to extend a very warm welcome to our speaker, Mr. S. Gopalan, who has very kindly agreed to speak before us. Mr. Gopalan is going to talk on a theme: are Krishnamurti's questions utopian, fanciful, and idealistic, or are they realistic, pragmatic, and practicable? uh, since most of us know Mr. Gopalan very well, I'll briefly introduce him. Mr. Gopalan is a chartered accountant by profession, but he got in touch with Krishna in 80s, and from last more than 4 decades, he has been associated with the Bangalore, the Valley School Study Center. Mr. Gopalan has written a number of books, uh, basically exploring intelligence, operating thought, and so on. With these words, I'll welcome Mr. Gopalan once again, and sir, you can begin your talk, which will be followed by question and answer session. Mr. Gopalan.
Thank you. Thank you. Today, I would like to raise this topic. Unfortunately, the exploration tends to be a little long to make it comprehensive, but I look forward to an intensive debate and discussion about the questions that are being raised. See, Krishnamurti has raised many questions in his talks and writings. For example, is there a possibility of a world without war? Can fear end? Is there an end to sorrow? Is there an ending of conflict? Can the mind change or transform itself? And so on and so on. Now, are these questions utopian, fanciful, idealistic? Or are they really realistic, pragmatic, and practicable in daily life? If we begin with the last question, can the mind change or transform itself? Krishnamurti has many times asked whether it is possible that man can be free of conflict. Can there be peace on earth? Does man have to be perpetually at war in the way that he has been going till now? And in 1984, when Krishnamurti was alive, a documentary was created which was called The Challenge of Change. And it gave an exposure to all the Krishnamurti schools. And Krishnamurti, and there were excerpts from different public talks, but it ended with this question: if you see the importance of change, why don't you change? That was the question that was raised in that documentary. And this begs the next question: who is to change? Is it the individual or the society? Who comes first? We tend to think that it is society which has to change. But what is society? Society is essentially man's relationship with somebody else. For that relationship, you have to begin with oneself, the individual. So the individual has to come first. And who is this individual? We've talked about this in previous talks too. The individual is a composite of life energy, the body, which includes the brain, and the field of thought that arises from the brain. If you take the example of a circle has three components: the circumference, the center of the circle, and the radius which connects the center to the circumference. If you take any one of these three away, the circle doesn't exist. Is the individual also similar? That there is the life energy, there is the body, and is there a field of thought? If you take any one of these away, does the individual exist? Can these components exist independently of themselves? Now, life energy always exists. It doesn't need any support of anybody or any other element to support itself. It always exists. The physical body arises using the life energy and it dissolves back into the life energy. Can the physical body exist with life energy alone? It does. It does exist for many parts of our lives without the third element, the field of thought. So, but can thought exist independently without the life energy or without the body? No. Thought requires both life energy and the body and the brain to be functioning for itself to be functioning. So the field of thought cannot exist without life energy and body. And it is this field of thought that gives rise to the sense of individuality. So if you look at the primary and the secondary causes of individuality, the primary cause is the combination, the life energy, the body, and thought. But then if you look at the immediate cause, is thought the result of individuality? It's very tempting to think so. Because if you don't have thought, there's no individual. So thought must give rise to individuality. That's a logical assumption we can and tend to make very, very easily and all the time. But I would like us to just hold on to that question as we investigate further. If you investigate the world of outside, the world of nature, in which there are other creatures existing, how do we know that this world exists? Only through our senses and as recognized by thought. So the world that we know is the world of our thought, of our mind. We can't articulate a world which is not of our thought. We can't articulate that. Now, what does it mean to know? Know implies recognizing using knowledge and memory. So we can know something which is dead of the past. Is it ever possible to know what is in the present moment? Is the state of knowing the same as knowledge? Or the state of knowing is independent of memory? It is at the level of perception, and only the result of it is articulated as knowledge, and that result is always dead. So we use this word self-knowledge again and again and again. Is the correct expression to use self-knowing? Because knowledge is information from the past. So what is the state of knowing that is always in the present? Is it not attention, perception, understanding? Now, while in these states, while one is actually in these states, and every one of us at some time or the other is in these states every day, at that time, does thought arise? Only life energy and the body exist. Brain is functioning. Sensations are there. They are being perceived in the brain, but thought is silent. So what makes life energy and the body gives rise to thought becomes an interesting question. And it's fairly easy to see that it is motive. And motive is a part of memory. Can any thought arise without the seed of a motive? And that seed comes from the memory. So then the question comes, can there be any memory at all without the nucleus of an I? Now, in the world, and in particularly in science, we have the simile of the crystal. A crystal is formed when there is a nucleus around which it can coagulate. If a liquid is cooled where there is no element available for it to coagulate, that liquid becomes super cooled. It cools below the level of its freezing point, crystals do not form. So the crystal requires that center, what we call the primary nucleation, around which the crystal can form. Many of you may have heard of Rupert Sheldrake. There are a set of 4 video talks in 1981 that Sheldrake had with Krishnamurti and David Bohm and a psychologist called John Hidley. And very soon after these talks, Sheldrake published a book on his theory of morphic resonance, the nature of formative causation. And he followed this up in 1988 with a book called The Presence of the Past. And in both these books, he pointed to the fact that there must be a collective memory from all previous knowledge. And it is this collective memory, and he hypothesized that it transfers through a process of morphic resonance. Now, we are not going into morphic resonance, but essentially this idea that there is a collective memory which is independent of the individual brain. And as Krishnamurti himself has raised again and again, the brain is not individual. The brain is the common brain of all mankind. So what is the nucleus of this collective memory? Is it the individuality of the I which begins for the process of nucleation of memories and attracts memories around? Is that why I is the starting point for memory and not memory is the starting point of I? So does the rising of the individuality as the primordial I bring in the duality of thinker and thought and the separation of knowledge from the individual, and then one helps the other? But is the beginning the coming into effect of this primordial I? Now, the once thought comes in, it must bring nature, it must bring the world as external and internal, it must bring in the duality of thinker and thought. And with that must come fear, sorrow, conflict, identity, war. In the nature that we understand through our thought, one organism is food for the other, whether that food is plant or animal. Now, no organism wants to die to become food for somebody else. So, when one organism has to be the basis of sustenance of the other organism, how can there be peace, love, compassion coexisting in the world that we know? And therefore, the question came to me, are Krishnamurti's questions then utopian? They are, if the result is sought to be seen through thought and in the world created by thought. Now, is there any other way to see? We know that even before thought arises, there is perception, there is insight, there is understanding, and these are not of thought. So there is a way of interacting with the world without thought. In that moment of perception, insight, understanding, do we know what is happening? We have no knowledge of it. And in that state, is there not peace, love, and compassion? Even for the brief moment that thought is quiet. And therefore, it becomes very clear that Krishnamurti's questions are not utopian, fanciful, and idealistic. They are very much realistic, pragmatic, and practicable to be lived in one's life. But why is this not perceived in this way generally? Is it not the fact that thought comes in the way? The greater the activity of thought, the greater the activity of analysis, idea, imagination, the greater is the interference with the process of perception and insight. Therefore, the beginning of thought is choice. And what is that choice based on? On a motive. That motive may not have originated even in this life, but it is there in the memory, wanting to fulfill, etc., etc., etc. Now, if you look at the lifestyle of the past and the present, earlier cultures did not emphasize the role of the individual as much as modern culture does today. Modern culture, and particularly modern education and the lifestyle, extraordinarily reinforces the idea of the individual, the rights of the individual, the need for the individual to express himself, etc., etc., etc. Now, it's very clear that the senses are turned outwards, but they can be turned inward. That requires tremendous energy because we have been habituated to looking outwards. The culture of the past encouraged that inward looking, at least at some point in the human being's life, especially after the age of 40, 45. It encouraged you to delve into deeper questions. But if you look at modern lifestyle, education extends till the age of 30 to 35. Working life extends to the age of 75. In politics, there is no age of retirement. Now, turning inwards never gets importance. And without that readiness, if a person is forced to turn inwards by circumstances, invariably there is mental illnesses or all kinds of psychological ailments which arise. So, work or our occupation is the mainstay of human life today, from the age of about 20 till the age of about 75. Work is our identity, and without this identity, there is no power. So, do we ever consider living without an identity? Krishnamurti asked this question. Can you be a nobody? Can you live as a nobody? But do we really ask this question with the intent of exploring it for ourselves in our lives? Or if we ask it because Krishnamurti has asked it and then get into a discussion, what does it mean to be a nobody? So, we are opt to think that thought is a tremendous tool in today's world. Is it? Do we ever question whether thought is the great tool that it is said to be? Oh, sure, it has brought in a lot of inventions, but for every invention, thought has created two problems. In solving one problem, thought always creates one more problem. So, is it really such a great tool as all that if it's going to add to our problems? Even in the health and longevity, because we like to look at modern medicine, how it has made life simpler for us. You can have a knee replaced, you can have anything replaced and extend your life. But extend what? Extend the suffering of life? Because modern medicine doesn't teach you how to enter suffering, how to address suffering. Without addressing conflict and suffering, what does extension of life mean? It only means perpetuation of that conflict. And so, how is that a benefit at all? But thought has one very, very significant contribution to offer. And that's why only the human being has access to it. Others don't have. The capability to turn from the outer to the inner is facilitated by thought. Without thought, I don't know whether this turnaround can come. This is the power of thought, but we don't seem to be looking at this power at all. We seem to be looking at all the inventions that thought creates in the outer world. But this single capability of thought to facilitate the turning from the outer to the inner, and then the direction of that exploration can happen only with through thought and intellect. But are we using thought that way? Are we educating thought to be used in that way? I don't think it's happening anywhere in the world. So if you look at the human opportunity, Indian cultures have talked about the fact that the human birth is an extraordinarily rare birth, and therefore it's a tremendous opportunity. Tremendous opportunity for what? For turning inward. That is the opportunity. But modern lifestyle and our modern thinking and modern culture seems to be moving away from all these possibilities at all. It is only in turning inward that one can meet and experience these questions which Krishnamurti has been raising. And that's one of the reasons why Krishnamurti advocated taking retreat. Take retreat, stop the routine, because the routine is thought's way of avoiding looking inward. So that's what, but are we able to find the time to take a retreat, whether where we are or by moving out? So our actual living, if you look at it, and we have created that living, is a continual compromise through family, through grandchildren, through society, through legacies that we have built up. It's a compromise to avoid that inward look, that inward turn. There's a Swami Dayananda Saraswati, a very humorous speaker, and he always used to narrate one story with a huge laugh. He would say, there was this old lady who came up to him and said, Swamiji, life is becoming very, very difficult. I would like to end it. I would like to have freedom from this life. So the Swamiji said, right, let's do it now. Come with me. We'll go to death. And then she said, wait. My granddaughter has got married and she's expecting and she's going to come here in 6 months. Let me finish that and come. Pointing out that when we are actually confronted with having to end, we always find some excuse or the other why it needs to be postponed. So there's also a saying in our Indian scriptures, the last thought of what you have just before you die is the direction in which you will go forward. If we look at our lifestyle today, the number of loose threads that we have, what is the last thought that will happen? Oh my God, I put something on the gas, I haven't switched off the gas. I switched on that heater and I forgot to switch it off. It will start with this. And then today, even modern science is saying at the moment of death, your entire life flashes before you. And a week ago, there was a newspaper article which talked about the fact that neurologists have discovered some flash in the brain that happens in that last moment. And they say, perhaps this is evidence of it. So what is it that will flash before our life? All the untied threads, untied knots, all the loose ends are going to flash. And that becomes enough incentive to be reborn to complete it. So what does it mean to end something at each moment so that there is no residue? It doesn't give you a reminder that this is pending, this is unfinished. So a cluttered mind right, results in a cluttered outer world. So when you go to a beach or when you go to the mountains and you stand there, why is it that the mind becomes quiet? Because there is no clutter outside. There isn't 1 inch of space. Every inch of the ground is filled with plants and other creatures. But there is no clutter. There's an order there, a natural order, and whatever our thought plans is disorder. So we need to begin with that outer and then head towards that inner. Now, we are very contemptuous of tradition, and we are very contemptuous of the way they saw this problem to be addressed. But just reflect for a moment. Is it as silly as we think it to be? The traditional practice of visiting temples, going on a pilgrimage, holding a japmala or a Tibetan prayer wheel was seen as the way of keeping the mind from wandering. You can't stop the mind from wandering just by thinking. Similarly, this modern alternative that we have been given for is entertainment, and you can see how it's expanding. And if one is not watchful in one's own life, what does one do now with the internet? Go to Google, look up some news, see whether Imran Khan has resigned, what's the latest. The mind seeks something superficial. That's its instinct. So to make that mind turn needs some kind of energy. And these techniques were simply offered as simple ways, like using a walking stick when you need a support. I think there's much meaning in that. And similarly, the traditional approach, we said, when you come to the age of 60, vanaprastha, withdraw from activity, because activity will take you outward only. So withdraw from activity and become a wanderer psychologically. Whether you physically walk out or not is different, but psychologically, can you become a wanderer? And in that context, we need to ask, what is austerity? Is it an act of will which says, I will give up this, I will give up this? Or does it say, how much do I need? The food we need, at our ages at least, is a fistful of rice and a fistful of dal. Don't need anything more. Why do we then need a refrigerator, microwave, so much gadgets around, and then all of them require their maintenance, and we get caught into that samsara? Do we get caught into it because we want to be caught into it? 2 sets of clothing are enough. If you have a washing machine, you wash one today. Because it has a dryer, next morning it's ready. So you just need 2 sets of clothes. Why do we need more? But mind will not allow you to do that, and it won't allow you to discard. 50 years ago in the Indian Railways, there was a little board in every coach. Less luggage, more comfort, make travel a pleasure. Right? Today you don't see that board. But it's such a true statement. If you have less psychological baggage, life can be a pleasure. Our problem, our luggage is the burden that we are carrying. But who is saying carry that burden? No, we don't experience the joy of having little in middle age, in our working lives. And then we are afraid to let it go and live with little. But living with little is actually such a freedom. Unless you experience, you can't understand that. So one of the most important things Krishnamurti pointed out is to hold a question. So Krishnamurti is counterintuitive. I mean, in all his talks, he explains intellect at great depth intellectually. But the listener is not meant to do the same intellectual analysis. He is meant to use that as a starting point and facilitate an experience for himself. And when Krishnamurti asks, when the mind is in pain, can it remain with that pain? Because any movement away from it brings the thinker. Now you can discuss this ad infinitum, but until you actually do it, you can't really get a feel of what it implies. And Krishnamurti is also pointing out that if you remain in sorrow and don't make a movement to escape from it, then there is passion. Now for us, that's a statement. One has to touch that passion for oneself. Only then you really get the feeling of what this man has been talking about. And therefore, I would like to ask, Krishnamurti died 1986, and an extraordinary teacher. And if you do the calculations, what are the probabilities of a human being coming into contact with a realized soul? It comes as 1,000,000:1 or 1,000,000:1 or some such number. We've had that opportunity, not just being born as humans, but coming in touch with a teacher of this kind. What have we done with it in our lives? That's the one and only question that is relevant, because these questions are not utopian, they're pragmatic. So Krishnamurti's contribution was in two major ways. One was the public talks, where to an audience of 4,000, he talked as if it was a one-to-one dialogue between him and every listener. It was not a lecture, never was. He also went a great deal into education. And he made it clear that one was to facilitate the other. When the idea of study centers came up, this was one of the objectives he put down for the study centers. He said they need to attract people who want to explore these questions. And from this group, people would come in as teachers into the schools. Right? Neither happened. Very, very few people come to the study center to explore for themselves. And there is hardly anybody who visits a study center who comes into the school as a teacher. So has his intention really failed in that sense? See, the study center programs everywhere have become discussion meetings where you sit and disseminate and discuss and pull apart fear and conflict endlessly. How does it bring in that inward movement of understanding and experiencing? And in education, see, Krishnamurti's vision of education must translate into a liberal system of education. But the reverse is not true. A liberal system of education will not necessarily bring in the questions that Krishnamurti is raising. That requires a teacher who has these questions. And that is why that emphasis on people who come to the study centers coming into the schools to teach. Now we have completely separated the two. So Krishnamurti education has become liberal education, as so many others offer liberal education. The opportunity that he raised was something completely different. We seem to have let go of that. So my only question, which I want to end with, is: have we allowed Krishnamurti to go the way Mahatma Gandhi went? Mahatma Gandhi had all his teachings. Today, his name is put in every institution and it remains on the nameplate. And inside, you do what you want. Is Krishnamurti's teaching going the same way? The opportunity is for oneself to change. It's not about changing society and bringing change in the world. Is this opportunity worth exploring for every individual? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. As usual, it was a very nicely placed discourse. And you have raised some fundamental questions like you always do in your lectures. Just by way of comments, I want to take the last point of your theme, whether Krishnamurti's teachings are practical. You know, by practical, we normally mean something which is useful to me in my daily life. And if you judge case teachings in that light, for example, he said that you can only know yourself in relationships. And I see that when I do observe and I'm aware of my relationship issues, it brings less conflict. All those things that he said, you know, like the answer to a problem lies in the problem. So if you really deeply see that, you can see that it's very, very practical in our daily life. Another comment that I want to make, you said about the coming of eye and memory. You know, before a child is born, the genetic conditioning is already taking place when he is in the womb. And before the child is born, the cultural conditionings also become a part of his life. So even before the I comes, the child is conditioned. And lastly, I want to mention that I forgot what I wanted to say. Anyway, when I get that point, I'll come back to you. But I think Harshad Bhai and Pradeep ji wants to make comments. So first, Harshad Bhai, please unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Is my voice coming?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Gopalan sir. Very, very interesting to listen to you. About the topic, about Krishnamurti's questions. When I first came, the first book of Krishnamurti in 1972, he was asking many questions which I found very, very relevant to my daily life. And because I was in America in a different culture, I used to think of myself as an Indian or Hindu, and I was not able to communicate well with people of other nationality, religion. And Krishnamurti was asking this question, why do you think of yourself as a Hindu or an Indian or a Christian or Chinese? And he said that we are all human beings. Psychologically, we are all similar, and we all go through problems like fear or jealousy, loneliness, boredom. And so when I read that, first time I begin to look, first I begin to look outside, and I found that Americans were lonely in their own country, and they had many problems, psychological problems, drinking, drugs, and all that. So when I realized that I am a human being, and these are just conditioning, Hindu, Indian, and when I really felt it, I begin to open up to people of many different nationalities and religion, and I lived with them, shared apartment with them. So, but the deeper thing, what Krishnaji says, is about the source from where our problems come, like fear or jealousy or anger. And he said that everything is coming from thinking, and from thinking comes this sense of I or me. And then we say, I like it, I don't like it. And then this duality starts between thinker and thought. So when I read that, it was very new, and I wanted to verify it. And I used to sit quietly in my office. I was doing PhD at that time in America. And when with all my curiosity, attention, energy, I directed the observation within me to look at the beginning of a thought, then my mind really stopped. And it was a different kind of feeling when there is no thought, there is no sense of I, there are no problems, but the senses can function properly. So once I verified that yes, our problems are coming from thinking, and there is something within us which is other than thinking, which Krishnaji calls it awareness or choiceless awareness or intelligence or many, many different words. So when we come to that sense of looking without thinking, then we can really see how the thinking is operating within us and how it is creating problems in our relationship, in the daily life. So I feel that this thinking is a problem, only when there is no this awakening of intelligence which can look at thinking very, very clearly. And that kind of awakening may come in a person who is very, very curious, very simple, not asking too many questions on Krishnamurti after reading Krishnamurti, but look directly within oneself with simplicity, curiosity, energy, attention. So that kind of beginning, that what Krishnaji says, freedom is at the beginning. That ability to look at our own self very, very clearly, that itself requires the freedom. And generally, our mind is going round and round in thinking, and that curiosity, intelligence is hidden under the dense layers of thinking and feeling. So our life is mostly lived in thinking and with the problems created by thinking. So only when a person really begins to feel that there is something else within us, that awareness or intelligence, and then our life becomes very simple and very clear, then we know that we were carrying so much burden with us, and we were thinking that everybody is carrying that burden and it is natural. But only when that burden goes away from our mind, then can we really see everything very clearly, whether it is a tree or the cloud or a tree or our own thinking. So Krishnamurti's questions are very, very good questions only if a person is able to give his whole attention and not think too much, because that is the problem with people who are interested in Krishnamurti. They have many, many dialogues, but what this requires aloneness, curiosity, energy to look within oneself. Initially, we can do it when we are alone, but later on, it can become our nature. And even in our daily life, talking with people, we can watch what is happening. Okay, I have said enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harshad Bhai. Before I give it to Pradeep ji, I just remembered what I wanted to comment on Mr. Gopalan's lecture. So you talked about going inwardly. I think the mind is capable of getting inwardly, and there are sages in India who have really turned completely inside, provided you can give that kind of energy. And I agree that it has to start with thinking, thought, but it certainly should not end with thought. The thought has to end someplace, then only one can go inside. With this comment, I'll request Pradeep ji to go ahead, and then Sushma ji.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to respond to Gopalan. I really enjoy listening to you. Gopalan, you have raised many issues starting with circle identity and life energy, outer to inner, and then relevance of the questions, and then simplicity. You have raised many issues, and also what is our luck in meeting these great once in a lifetime opportunity of meeting such people. Out of these, I want to touch two things. The one you said about simplicity in living with two clothes only we can live. And I also say, bring it to the here and now, we can also make our talks very simple. But it is not easy to make simple, because for that we need a complex understanding. There's a paradox of simplicity. You cannot be simple without having a complex understanding. I cannot live a simple life unless I have a very deep and complex understanding of life. I cannot make what I want to tell you simple unless I have a deep understanding of the subject I want to talk about. So that is the one aspect I want to throw light on, that even in talks we make it so complex, not just living and using only two clothes. The second thing that I want to touch is the relevance of these great people we come in touch with. Who I think for me, the relevance of Krishnamurti and other saints that I met, they inspire me. They're like the beacons, the pole stars in my life, and every day, when the thought comes to Pradeep, it just inspires them. It helps me to live a simple life, to just be awake, alert. The simplest message that I take from Krishna: just be aware and keep learning whatever is happening in the here and now. So these are the two beautiful things I just wanted to add to what all you said. You said many beautiful things. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep ji. Sushma ji, please unmute yourself. Unmute. Yes, please go ahead. Unmute yourself. Unmute.
Yeah. I think thank you, Gopalan, that I could listen to your talk in spite of our having the meeting from 9 to 11. I was very keen to listen to your talk because the subject which I felt was very important. I would just like to make one or two comments, and then of course everybody can say whatever they want to say. But see, you were saying that Krishnamurti mainly expressed himself in the two areas, mainly in the public speeches which he gave, and another area is related to the schools.
Sushma ji, you are unmuted again. Unmuted. Unmute. Unmute yourself. You are muted again. Kamlesh ji, can you unmute her?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think one major area of Krishnaji's life and dimension, which maybe we miss out, that we only go by the spoken words of Krishnamurti. But I think Krishnaji's major work, according to me, is in the area of unconscious, of intangible level. He has communicated with people, and many times he has indicated it also. He has indicated, like, see, once he says that suppose you are talking to you are sensitive and you are talking to a person who is not sensitive, how will you communicate with that person? And then he says that can your unconscious touch the unconscious of that person? So that is something which is very important according to me, that Krishnaji has not talked only in the area of the known and in the area of tangible, but in the area of intangible also. And that creates a different atmosphere in Krishnamurti schools and Krishnamurti study centers also, because Krishnaji's presence in multiple ways is brought up in these areas. Many people who come from outside, they feel about it. Second thing, I'm part of the study center. That's why I just want to say something that which I think study centers are mainly meant for people. It's not a very big group activity type thing. It is just, even if 2-3 people are there and they are talking to each other intimately, talking to each other their hearts, I think that's the study center is meant for. And Krishnaji always wanted such spaces in his campuses where actually people can have that harmonious relationship, talk to each other and express something with each other. And that is the main purpose of the study center. And in that whole process, if some teachers can go to the school, that was another thing, but it is not meant for having good teachers, and that's why the study centers are created. I think the main purpose is, can one really explore oneself really in a deeper way and away from our whole working pattern. According to me, that is the whole purpose of the study center. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushma ji. Thank you. Yes, Anand ji, please unmute yourself.
Sir, when you ended, you said, this gives us an opportunity for oneself to change. So when I say this gives an opportunity for oneself to change, my question is, why should I change? Over, sir.
Yes, why should I change? When I see the sorrow and conflict that I am in, do I want to remain in it? No. Pain is a tremendous teacher. I don't want to remain with that pain. So I always ask, is there a cause for this pain? If there's a cause, that cause can be ended. So anything that has a cause can have an end. Pain must have a cause. Conflict must have a cause. Suffering must have a cause. So if I discover that cause, will I be free of it? Is a question which would naturally come, would it not?
So my father passed away. I'm in tremendous pain. I know the cause. And then my conditioning is to move away from pain, to move away from suffering, to move away from sorrow. That's my conditioning. That's what I'm doing all the time.
So we are used we are used to moving away from pain. Whereas this teacher is saying something else. He's asking you, can you observe why you want to move away from pain? Is it possible to remain with that pain and see what happens? Now the end of the reward is not announced. You have to experience it and do it. But moving away from pain is not a solution to ending pain. That's only an avoidance.
So there is pain, even when my father has not passed away. There is pain and suffering in this world. I separate myself. I say I have nothing to do with that. When every religion has said we are all one. I don't see that. And I don't know what suffering and pain is. Every day, so many people are dying. 8,000 children are dying every day because of hunger. So many people are being murdered. So many people are dying in war. I mean, I don't look at it. I don't want to see that. So I don't know what suffering and pain is. I'm all the time. But I come here for this discussion. I want to get away. And I also say I heard Krishnamurti and I've changed. Krishnamurti himself said, that means I'm making him a teacher. I'm making him a guru. When I say I read him and then there was a change in me. See, what Krishnamurti says, don't make me a guru, but I am making him a guru. I am making him a teacher. Can I look at all these things? Can we look at all these things is my question, sir. Over.
Yeah, so the looking at is by myself. If I am making him a guru, I need to ask, why am I seeking a guru? I need to ask it for myself, not for the rest of the world. So can I look in myself, why I need a reassurance of what is the right path? Why do I want an assurance for somebody that you do this and this will end? Why am I always looking for reassurance outside? And the pointing out has been done that perhaps even the cause of all this is that illusory separation which has come in our mind. Is that separation actually valid? Or is it an illusion created by one's own thought and thinking? This is the inquiry, but it's a journey which one has to experience for oneself. The guru, as you call it, is only a signpost which says, go in this direction. You don't have to put the man on the pedestal because he said, go in this direction. You explore and find out.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Dinesh Wagware, Mr. Dinesh Wagware, please go ahead.
Are you able to listen to me, sir?
Yes.
Gopalan, sir, if the case questions are so realistic and practicable, why they are not a question of a common person? Why they are only questions of elite and intellectuals? And if they are the questions of the common person, with the literature and by the wordings of the K, can it be explained to a common person in an easy way?
Sir, unless I understand, I can't explain to anybody else. So what Mr. Prakash said earlier, he said simplicity comes from complexity. I wouldn't word it that way. I will say you can only be simple if you have understanding. Complexity means it is mixed up. I would prefer to say understanding. So if you have understood that you are carrying a unnecessary burden on your head, please put down the burden. Nobody has to tell you that, you yourself will do it. So this becomes very tempting to say, how can I measure this teacher's teaching by how many thousands of people have said I have understood? Have I understood? I am the world. First, have I understood that? So the separation is where the escape of our intellect. I'm suggesting, instead of worrying about the world, leave the world to whoever created it. Can I ask, here is an opportunity that I have had to break free. Am I using this opportunity? That's the only relevant question for me.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Very rightly said. We have Mr. Prasad Mulupuri. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Sir, I don't know. Most of the questions which we raise, they seem to me the result of our scholarship. Because, I mean, if we want to say, are the questions raised by Krishnaji, are they realistic or utopian? I mean, in what way are they utopian and which question is utopian? We don't have to give certificate of merit to Krishnaji. We don't have to say they are not utopian and all that. But for me, I mean, unless you specify which is the question which is troubling you as being utopian, there is no point in discussing it. There is a statement about the Shakespeare's critics. If you want to see genius, go to Shakespeare. And if you want to see the other types, go to his critics. Like that, we are raising questions ourselves which do not seem to emanate from the teaching. In what, like a gardener who is using some insecticide to remove weeds, Krishnaji has mainly removed the weeds so that something valuable can grow. And when you remove weeds, life becomes light, not heavy. So we are saying we are examining the insecticides and saying, creating some scholarly structure around it. The main contribution of Krishnaji is, to me, removing the weeds. We don't think of that. What are the weeds which he has removed? Once you remove them, your belief, your faith, your conditioning, etc., etc., once you remove them, you have a smooth sailing. That is what we should think about. We do not pay attention to the removal of weeds. We remain with the weeds, and at the same time we want to grow something valuable. I mean, which are the things about sorrow? How is it? Can we end sorrow? How is that question utopian? Any question, specific, let us specify the question and see whether it is utopian or not. One thing we may say, nobody has changed. Nobody has understood, and so nobody has changed. But I find a lot of people have changed, much more than the followers of other teachings. There are multiple teachings in the world. And here is one gentleman who has said certain things. He said, nothing is, you don't bother about the rest. You think about yourself. And I have also been trying to understand him. Nobody can say, I have understood him perfectly or anything like that. But why are we raising these questions, whether they are utopian or not? I mean, anybody who understands himself, who looks into himself or looks at the world, it is quite elementary that all the questions raised by him are relevant, primary, important. And because we are not understanding those questions, the world is in this mess. And my own personal life, my life is in a mess. I admit that my life is a mess. I see that. But that doesn't mean his teaching is utopian. My life is a mess. I admit that. I have no illusions about it. But I have to see why my life is in a mess. Not that the teaching is a mess or that it is utopia. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Prasad.
Yes, sir. What you said is absolutely right. If I see that my life is a mess, I have to address it. You're absolutely right. I meant utopian when you listen to a question from Krishnamurti, right? Can war end in this world? I don't know whether there has been any other religious teacher who has asked this question. Everybody has said different things in different ways, but this man asked, can there be a life without war? Now, can you even imagine how such a thing can happen? Can the defense industry maintains our economy? It's a major career option for our people, right? We can't think of a law and order unless there's a uniformed policeman with a gun standing there, right? Can we even conceptualize what is the state without a war? At the level of thought, I'm saying it can't be done, right? We can only predict and say, well, if everybody comes to the understanding, maybe there'll be a different world. But it is very much easily possible if I understand that war begins first with me. The separation of myself is the starting point of all war. So if I want to end war, first I have to ask, is there a separation in me? Do I see myself separate from somebody else? It's an inward journey. Only if his question is taken as a journey, as a starting point for an inward journey, does the question not remain utopian. But if you just have conferences on, can there be a world without war and how do you bring in peace? You can go on talking about it. There will never be an end to that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. I think we have two more questions, then we'll go to Prasadji once again. Mr. Ramarao, please go ahead.
Good morning, friends. Any question came to my brain, a lot of thoughts will rise. It will move endlessly. Then the questions, something like this conflict ends, who am I? Or something like observer and observer. That time also the thought flows very rapidly. After some extent, it gives silence. I want to share that much only. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Yes, Durga ji, please unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, sir. Yeah. As it's a quite a thought-provoking questions you have put in your very topic, and I think enough already has been discussed about the questions, the very topic of your discussion. Like the previous speakers have already raised a few queries, and you also addressed them properly. I think to the best of your, ability or understanding, whatever it is. Yes. Yeah. At certain points, like, if you hear the questions, like, as you already said, war and all those larger issues, one really feels, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not possible. It's impossible, but when we come to our own lives, our day-to-day living, there we find, the questions he raises about our human consciousness and our day-to-day issues. You feel he's talking so much of sense, there's so much of practicality in his text and in his questions he's raising, and he's asking, probing us to question them and going to them and inquiring to them. There you find, it's there's a plenty of relevance there. Maybe that's how one gets connected to what K is saying. Because on the face of it, when one hears about these larger issues, larger affairs of the world, one really feels, what he's talking. Is it really possible? Yes, sir. And especially when we go through the text, where K speaks to the students. The type of questions he asks them and he addresses them, and we get a lot of clarity which way he's pointing to. And there you find even plenty of common sense and more practical sense, in his, especially when his conversations with the kids and the students. That's what my understanding, sir. And I think in your discussion you raised, setting the house in order. If you have so many issues in your mind, I think that's what K says, when your attention is so much diverted and divided into so many things. And if you're too dependent on the gadgets and how our day-to-day life and modern living has, brought us to this juncture, dependence on the gadgets and this information technology and all these things, how they are taking away so much of time from us. So I think basically our attention, unless and until it is diverted towards these things, and unless and until we start chalking out all these things, shelling all these things, and it's not possible to take time for oneself. And maybe that's what K says, first of all, that outer setting of the house in order and inner as well. And as you said, how important it is to keep reducing one's baggage, and when you look at life as we grow old, our requirements are less and all that, and how easy it is also to live life in a very simple way also. And I think I already mentioned about that, ancient nuggets of wisdom, which our spiritual teachers have laid out, the 4 ashramas. I think it's very important that, we pick up things from there. A lot of people asked, K asked us not to read any texts, not to read any books. There also some questions arise. But it is not important, what he asked. If you have to make sense in your life, if it has to, you have to bring order in your life. And if you are finding the ways and means in the ancient wisdom, why not pick it up? Why have to keep quoting K? He said not to read books, not to read that. I wonder why that questions come at all. And whatever the ancient philosophy, that is such a well-established way of life and living they had mentioned. But I think K broadens our vision rather. He probes us questions and we feel like going to other texts also and read them also, so that, these texts make sense to us. Because initially the questions are, so intense and so deep, it's not possible for us to understand them and grasp them in one go. So I think that way also, that human consciousness, maybe that's why he said it's not easy to go into that inward journey. It's very easy to go onto the moon and the Mars and other planets, but inward journey is the toughest part for mankind, maybe. And that's why he used to say, I'm just spreading the seeds, that's my responsibility. And where it goes and where it falls and whoever picks it up, it's for the humanity to decide. And once somewhere also I have read, he seems to have stated that this teaching is going to last for maybe hundreds of years. So maybe, and it's a slow process. It's a very gentle, and one has to be very patient with it. And one never knows, where it is going to take. But it's only just, boarding on to that some journey and taking out, the previous speaker said, taking out the weeds in your own self or in your own living and setting your house in order. Do keep doing all these things. And maybe, and I think, sir, these kind of discussions and these study centers, they may be having two sides to it, more sides to them. They may not be producing and providing all that support and all that churning out so much of wisdom as Gabe might have visualized. But I think any beginning is a beginning. And and he says, even few persons understand, I think they can collectively affect the consciousness of humankind. That we don't know, but that used to be his favorite statement. So I think that keeping the flame alive, or the spark alive, is what it's all about. I feel, that's why this the importance of these discussions and the study centers and the schools. That's all I have to say, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Durgaji. We have Mr. Prasad.
Sir,
yes, please go ahead, sir.
I will take only 1 minute. About war. Can the war end? That is the question raised by Gopalan sir. Krishnaji never said that a raging war will stop by reading his book. We cannot stop the present war going on between Ukraine and Russia. We cannot stop that. But we can see the seeds of war, how they are, one man's or two people's stubbornness can result in this war. How a war begins and what are the contributory causes for the war. That can be seen from the teaching. And to that extent, he is spreading sanity in an insane world. That is all how I look at it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. Yes, Harshad Bhai, please go ahead.
Yes, as Dubeji said, that we are conditioned biologically and through our education, through our family upbringing. There is a lot of conditioning goes on, and our mind, it goes in many different directions, and generally our mind goes in that direction in which we are deeply, passionately interested in. So some people are interested in cricket and some are interested in politics, some are interested in films, so they go in that direction. So very few people would like to go within themselves to find what is really happening, how problems are arising in our daily life. And in case if someone is interested in going deeper, and then he comes to that state of silence, then people have told me that it is very frightening to be having no thought. And so they tried to go away and do something else. So to be in that state of freedom is very, very frightening because it means having no thought. It is like a psychological death. So very, very few people are really interested in the kind of freedom from all the problems of psychological nature. And that is why it doesn't happen. And then we go into theoretically discussing about it instead of really meditating, going deeper. And many people interested in solving the problems of the world, but it doesn't happen. The problem arises within us. And first we have to look it very, very clearly in our own daily life in relationship because we read every day in the newspaper that there are problems in the families, they are killing each other. So all these wars are going on everywhere. Only whether we are really interested and we have the ability to go deep and not frightened when there is a silence and there is a clarity. Okay, I finish.
Thank you, Harshabhai. Thank you. Vijayji has written a very good quote from Achyutji. Sir, would you like to say something on that?
Yeah. Yeah, there's just, it's, we say utopian. It was more, I don't know how to say. It's neither, it's inner humor, some way, painful humor maybe. How complex we turn, how complex we are raised, and how we continue with it. Also, this question of simplicity and complexity. Of course, life is perhaps complex because a lot of things are happening, a lot of networks, and a lot of at all levels there's certain complexity. There are contradictions, conflicts. And if we approach it, I think the approach is the main crux of the matter, it seems. Because we learn to approach it through thought. So jumbled, the whole thing is jumbled up because of thought, and we try to approach it through thought. Obviously, there's always a relative clarity in expression, articulation and all, but we never really come to see things or wade through those waters and go to the end of the tunnel to see what reveals itself. Even in ordinary sense, even in ordinary level, in any field also, not even talking of some kind of nirvana feeling or so why can't one approach things very simply if we see that thought is not taking you anywhere? It is taking you from complexity to complexity. No conflict gets ever resolved through, it gets suppressed, it gets sidelined, you work out compromises, but that's never, it's not that you walk through it, you are just, it's over, no residue. And you may have debated, you may have discussed, whatever, but can it happen that the moment, seconds later, it's all over? There's no, that can, it seems, happen only if there's a quality of alertness, which again, you can't force. The best thing can't be brought about through any, they are free actually. They are free, and probably best things in life are free or come to us rather we going after them. So, and is it possible to allow awareness, allow senses, come back to the child in oneself and observe from there. Because child doesn't have a, or I don't know, because that conditioning happens very early also, that's true. I mean, we also have romanticized image of a child. But we do observe that a lot of observation happens. Child is generally gazing, hearing, attentive, and that is lost. I think that seems to be in everyday living. Why is it that difficult? Listening to within the family, while interacting with friends, just listening and listening to what is coming and listening to what is coming from within. And why is one so much anchored in the notion of individuality? Does it really, is it so solid really? It is, maybe ecosystem provides you that and it reinforces it. But is it really so solid? When you look at it, it doesn't seem. There's a certain movement. It's there and it's not there. So I think it's a question of approach. We can at least reflect on it, look at it. Whatever is making our life complex or we see complexity, is there a way to not get stuck on this bank or that bank, but just look at it? Shouldn't be all that hard. Maybe through our thinking, we are making it also a bit too hard. So it's perhaps neither. It's difficult to catch because the moment the words come, words always move in binary ways. But awareness does, I think awareness is, when it comes, it does away with that binary pressure. Doesn't it happen with all of us? If we are not greedy for this to happen always. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijayji. Thank you. I think we have come to the end of the session, and I want to thank Gopalan sir for being with us and raising some fundamental issues. I must tell the participants that Gopalan sir is not the first one to raise this question whether Krishna's teachings are utopian or they practical, because many people have asked that question. And I think asking questions is the right thing to do, but otherwise how would you learn? So just because that question was asked, it should not be set aside, because they're very, very relevant in our daily life. Many people accuse Krishna of being too theoretical, in a plane which is not easily understood. So I think questions must be asked for our own clarity and our own understanding. With these words, I thank Gopalan sir once again for being with us. And next Sunday, we'll have Chidanandji, Swami Chidanand, as you all know. He is going to talk on some words of the rishis, and do not be surprised to find the flavor of Krishna's teachings in them. So next Sunday, 6 p.m. It will be in the evening. So you're all welcome to join us. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dubeyji.
Thank you.
Kamlesh, you can close it.
Okay.